Namaste. Welcome to this Ask Me Anything session for May. I am recording this a day early or so because we're off to silent retreat in a couple of days. So just a quick reminder that there won't be any live satsang now until the 16th of June after retreat and a little break. So we'll get started with the questions and the comments that have come in for this month. And as always, if you have a question or something you'd like me to explain or something you want to share, feel free to leave it as a comment underneath this video, and I'll answer them, go through them at the end of June and see what we get. So this first one says, it's from Ethereal Dawn, and it says, "Hi Helen, my question for next month is, when I do the noticing the space meditations, what I always sense is that there is no space. I don't feel a spaciousness or a boundlessness. What I sense doesn't have a boundary. True, but it is without dimension. I would love to hear your thoughts on this." So it is when we notice the space around us. Space is just a word. It can mean different things. We could also use consciousness, presence, beingness, awareness. But noticing the contextual field, the space around us, we can begin to understand that it is not really a thing, and it doesn't obey the same laws of time and space as objects do in the room that we're sitting in. The space in the room is different. And there really ultimately isn't any difference between that space and consciousness. It's formlessness, and it's everywhere. And as you rightly said, it doesn't have a boundary. So this space, when I really investigate where it actually stops, contrary to what my mind thinks, I'll come to see it doesn't stop. It doesn't have an edge or a boundary. And it's also, as you've pointed out here, dimensionless. It is without dimension. So dimension means it has distance, it has duration, it has direction, all of those. Does it actually apply to this empty space that we're investigating? Does it have any definable quality at all? And it may seem, while we're talking about empty space here, that in a room that it does, and it stops where the walls in the room stop. But if we imagine for a moment all of the objects in the room and the room itself disappearing, then would that empty space still have any definitions or limits or boundaries in that way? So that which is dimensionless is that space of our being in which all dimensions and time and space appear. So I would just continue your investigation, deepening into this. You're right, it has no dimension at all. And it is beyond any sort of normal rules of time and space. It's beyond anything that you can measure. And yet, the only thing you can really say about it is that it's here and that it's formless. It doesn't have any attributes. So it sounds like you're on the right track here. Keep investigating. Find out whether there's a difference between you and this dimensionless space, as you've said. And we can go from there. We can explore that together. We can broaden our understanding of it. For me, when I first touched upon this, it was so different to anything that I'd experienced before. I'd always thought of myself as an object, as a someone, as a something, and an individual, energetic being inside a body. And this was very, very different. So it took some getting used to and some investigating, but it sounds like you're really on the right track. And you know that, you can feel that, right? But sometimes it's good to have confirmation, encouragement, all of that. Okay. So Jesu Ravi says, "Thanks, Helen, for the talk about separation. I will see what I can see." So good. You asked a question before about what do I mean when I say I can't find a separate being? So looking forward to hearing what you see from that. Fran 125 says, is there any distance between the observer and the observed? When I notice I'm jealous of someone, am I also that jealousy? Thank you. So there isn't any distance or even any difference between the observer and the observed. You could say that what's observed here, in this case, jealousy, the feeling of jealousy, and that which is observing it, which I've just always called me or I, is the kind of space in which the body and the jealous feeling are occurring. So the observation is happening inside, all around, underneath the actual thing that's observed. So there isn't any distance at all. You could say the observation of it and the thing itself are in the same space and time. And there's also no difference between the two. You'll come to ultimately see they are the same, observer and observed. So absolutely, yes, I am. If I'm jealous of someone, I am that jealousy too. It's appearing. It's a way that I'm appearing. It's appearing inside the space of my being. My beingness is appearing as jealousy, made of the same beingness, not actually different to it. And perhaps even more revealing to recognize is that you are also the person you're jealous of. They're also observed, aren't they? Anything that you observe or anyone, any object subtly inside, like an emotion of jealousy, or externally like another being, seemingly another being, must also be your own self. Can that being be there without your observation of them? Good question. See what you find when you look at that. For me, this was the only way I could actually deal with jealousy. I found it was all over my awakening, jealous of other beings that seemed to have a deeper understanding than I did at the time. And to realize I was that jealousy, it was another way I was showing up. And I was also the other person I was jealous of, really helped to take the sting out of it. And the separateness then, that it's not like I'm over here and I don't have the realization I want. They're over there, they do have it. I realized I am both these body-mind vehicles, observer and observed, and everything in between. So I hope that helps you with the direction where to go with it. And if you want more help, please do ask, see where you get with your investigation, and get back to me if you need more help. So Disashi Soul says, hi Helen, your teachings have been so incredibly direct, relatable, and just plain helpful. Thank you so much. I rarely feel compelled to ask questions regarding awakening, because I understand that on the deepest level, any answer will undoubtedly point to the same place. But within the last several months, I've been experiencing what seems to be a very rapid acceleration in terms of awareness becoming the driver and my ego becoming more of the passenger. In a manner of speaking, I wouldn't describe this experience as scary so much as a bit disconcerting, because a part of me wants to do something about these perceived changes, while I know the truth is that there is actually nothing to technically do about it, other than, other than experience this as it unfolds. So my question is, you said before that your spiritual journey developed at a relatively slow and steady pace, and I'd say the same has been true for me. But do you remember a specific turning point where you could consciously notice that you no longer perceived or related to your day-to-day experiences the same way anymore? And if so, can you please say a little bit about how you dealt with the discrepancy of knowing that ego is no longer the biggest factor in my day-to-day experience, but yet still feeling like my ego has enough pull that it wants to still be running the show? I hope that makes sense. Any of your insights on this matter would be much appreciated. Love and light, Disashi. So yeah, I remember for quite some time it seemed like the shift was taking over. The metaphor you've used is brilliant. The driver and the passenger. First it was ego in the driving seat, and awareness wasn't even recognized to be in the car. I didn't even know that there was that. And then I realized that there was that awareness. And then as identity shifted, this switch over, ego seemed to get out of the driver's seat reluctantly and go around and sit in the passenger seat. And awareness seemed to move into the driver's seat. But like all backseat drivers or, disgruntled passengers, it still wanted to kind of take charge or direct it still believed that it was doing something. It still wanted to try to do something. Most specifically, it wanted to try to do something, ego, to speed up the awakening. So for me, there was a point where, and I don't know when it happened very quietly, very, very normally, where emotions would come up and things happened in my day-to-day experience. Same sort of triggers happen inside. But somehow I couldn't respond to those in the same way. I couldn't contract around those emotions. I couldn't push them away. So something happened with someone and there'd be anger inside, or fear, or a situation arose and there's guilt or something, unworthiness, and I couldn't push that away. I couldn't do anything with it except let it be. And that was really quite astonishing to me, because I hadn't felt that anything was different. I'd kind of been feeling more peaceful, a lot more peaceful. But suddenly to have this trigger arise and not be able to push it away. And the other side of that was true. I couldn't, as I got more peace and a deeper sense of bliss started to happen, I couldn't grab a hold of that either. It was all just kind of happening. And it was very disconcerting, is the right word, because it's the thing I've been longing for so long. But when it actually was there, it isn't our usual normal way of functioning, is it, as a human being? So coming to see this, it got through this disconcerting stage. And then there was this urge to still do. There's something I can do to speed my awakening up. This switch over, this change from whoever's in the driving seat. And for me, it helped to, how I dealt with it was really to see clearer and clearer, to come to understand that ego had never been in the driving seat. Because while I thought that I, as a separate being, was driving my life, I was the one, a separate being. I really was a separate being. And all my wants and desires and hopes and dreams were that of this separate person. And of course, I resisted letting those go if I thought that they were necessary. But when I came to see those hopes and dreams and desires had all been how the self, the awareness, wanted to evolve in and as this body-mind vehicle. And the only thing that was different was the fact that I was not separate. These dreams and desires and goals all remained in a way, but they lost their, I don't need to become financially stable or awakened or to improve my relationships to judge my self-worth on that. Those things happened anyway, but not as something I needed to happen. So those desires were fulfilled, but not from a place of needing them to be. So for me, and this may help you to just see clearer and clearer that there isn't really a switchover happening. It feels like that experientially. That ego has been asked to give up more and more of the day-to-day running. It's been the landlord of the house, and now we're asking it to just be a tenant. But as you come to see that it's always been in the passenger seat, the awareness has always been driving, or the awareness is the landlord and ego has always been the tenant, then nothing is really changing over. And you'll see that all the doing that you've done to try to get your awakening to this point was the self doing it anyway, was the awareness. And that doingness, seeming to do, will still continue just with the clear knowledge that there isn't really a person doing it, as you've said. So for me, clearly understanding that that was the case, that there isn't a switchover actually going on, I'm not relinquishing control as an egoic self and moving into something else. What's actually occurring is I'm coming to see clearer that it's never been the way I thought it was, that who's always been in the driving seat is the awareness. And when I saw that, it was easy to just let this seeming shift, changeover happen, experientially at least. That awareness is just coming to realize that it's never been a separate being, and therefore is able to run the mind and body more effectively, more joyously, more peacefully, more abundantly, and to see clearer. At the same time, there will always seem to be a doer. Right now, as I'm recording this, there seems to be someone talking here, doesn't there? And with the presence of words and sensory stimulation and the body, there'll still always seem to be and thoughts, someone here, a separate being doing something. But really, it's all just unfolding as the awareness moves into manifestation. This is how it's unfolding. So really looking at this switchover as to where to really put your focus for this, smoothing this transition. Is it really a changeover, or is it just a seeing clearly? Like, have we just been asleep with our eyes closed, dreaming that we were driving as a separate being, and really now we're just seeing we're driving as awareness itself? It doesn't have the same volition to want to do something like ego does, but it gets the job done nonetheless. So hope that one helps you. Okay. Oh. So next one is One Love Henry 1, who says, hi Helen, thank you for your insight and sharing. It is so amazing to ask questions and receive answers. My question this month is, besides asking the all to use me for the greatest good, how can I discern what work I should pursue? I've never had a clear calling or pull towards any career, and I'd like to find meaningful work I enjoy that also pays. What's the best question to ask the self to get a reply, even if it's just a helpful pointer? I worry that the universe has been dropping subtle clues which I've missed. What can I ask to get a knock to the head? Please, and thanks for your insight. Oh boy, did I need a knock to the head, because I was totally resisting what I wanted to do because I didn't feel what I wanted to do, i.e. this, would pay the bills, and it wouldn't have at the time. But so in terms of advice here, I would suggest separating the money that you need to earn to pay the bills temporarily from what you would like to do. So if you have some form of income right now, continue with that best you can, and allow that to pay the bills right now. But then looking at the most important question for me would, what would I spend my life doing if money wasn't an issue? If I didn't have to pay the bills, or if I was already bringing in enough money that my time was my own, what would I do? That was a very revealing question for me, because it also brought up a second question: that what do I find the most joyful? What could I do all day and never get tired of? When you do something in particular that you're enjoying, sometimes you lose track of the sense of time passing, and you might not get hungry or thirsty like you would doing other activities for that same length of time. So I would sit, if I were you, and what would I do if I could do anything? And then why would I do that? Why that answer? And what is it that brings me most joy? And a little bit extra, which might make this process easier, is to look at, rather than how I want to do what I want to do, it helps to start with, how do I want to feel? So I want to do something that's worthwhile and valuable, and that's going to help other beings, and it's also going to pay the bills for me, and I want to enjoy it. I want to have fun doing it. I want it to feel rewarding. So I wrote a list of, me, I like my list, how I would want to feel when I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, what I'm here for, what's my highest calling. And starting from there, I ended up with that. I want to feel that I'm contributing to humanity. I want to feel fulfilled. I want to feel excited. I want to feel passionate. And these are just a few things on my list. Gratitude, gratefulness. I wanted to feel abundant. I wanted to feel happy. So looking at what, if you knew what that was, your ideal occupation, how would you feel? You came home at the end of the day after a long day's work, which you absolutely enjoyed so complete. How would you feel? And the next morning, waking up to go do it again. Oh, I really just snooze 5 more minutes. So would we be more like we were as a child? Like, let's get to it. This is going to be an amazing day. And it is possible to live like that as an adult human being, to kind of jump out of bed really excited about the day. We don't have to necessarily lose that. So maybe start with a list first. At least 2 questions. What would I do if money and time weren't an object? And what do I get the most joy out of that I'm already doing? Because it'll be in your life somehow what you're supposed to be doing. And not expecting it to earn you money straight away is the key. Doing it just because you love it. And because you begin to feel so amazing doing it, you're just open energetically to receive the money that you need to receive. And it might not ever come in through that. It might come in some other way, the money. But you will be provided for and looked after by life if you're doing what you love. Even if there seems to be no way that can earn you any money at all right now, follow it anyway and see what happens. So hopefully that gives you kind of a way forward with it. And it's really where our highest joy, and I know it's a cliche these days, follow your bliss, but it really is true, because it'll never lead you astray. And just going on how you want to feel, let life fill in the details, rather than worrying so much about what you would do, what that looks like, as in the actual structure of it. So all those feelings that I focused upon, I was already feeling them in some way because I was cleaning houses for a living, had a business doing that at the time. And life gave me a knock over the head and I really hurt my shoulder, couldn't do that anymore. So I had to really look at this question. And I was kind of stubborn, life had to push me along that way. It's good that you're asking before you've got to that point, what is it I really would love to do? Because the answer to that is also the same answer. How can I serve best other beings? Same one and the same thing. Your own joy, your own peace is vital, because only inner abundance can reflect as outer abundance too, in terms of feeling fulfilled. Financial abundance, yes, but also feeling fulfilled and passionate, having enough time and energy to do what you want to do. So lovely. Monica Sitar says, thank you for you. Thank you. I would like to make sure I understood you correctly in your satsang about love. Are you talking about love as feeling? Frequently I heard it is not feeling, but acceptance of everything and everyone as they are, inclusion, blessings. So yeah, first and foremost, love is not a feeling. It is the very essence of awareness. Awareness is equally inclusive of everything, or we could say the space in the room, the contextual field, is equally allowing every single object to appear. And the essence of love is that it's not trying to change anything. It's just allowing what is to be. That's the deepest essence of love, isn't it? Love, awareness, contextual field, self, noumenon, all the same in the words that I'm using. So yes, first and foremost, it's not a thing at all. But then that open space of our being that is completely loving and has no capacity to reject anything will also flow through a human body and mind as loving thoughts, feelings, and actions. It will translate to that, progressively more unconditionally loving, and then there's just love before even anyone to love or anything to love. There's just love, which is same as awareness. So it's going to be both, and concentrating spiritually, at least on that feeling. It isn't a feeling, that which just is, as you've said here, is the inclusion of all things that appear in it without any ability to exclude or change anything. That's probably one of the best ways I've heard love described. Inclusion, acceptance, including the way it shows up as a feeling. So maybe that gives you a little way forward with that understanding. Okay, Ms. Tara 007 says, "Hi Helen, I listened to your recent satsang on love, and it was clear to me I still associate an open heart with a lack of personal boundaries and being resistant to loving the wrong people. I kind of close my heart in order to gain boundaries first, or to clear the past karma that keeps attracting people that hurt me. It's a tale as old as the world, I know. But can you share your own discoveries about people who you thought hurt you the most? Personal boundaries you developed, relationships you kept or you didn't, and love. Thank you." So what you said there is quite interesting, that it's clear there's still some association of personal boundaries with an open heart. That if I have an open heart, I won't have any personal boundaries. And that our ego assumes that if I close my heart, if I stay guarded and defended emotionally, intimacy emotionally will be, a barrier that I won't be able to do. Even intimacy with our own emotions, with what energy we're feeling, all of that. So for me, I began to see it was the other way around. The closing off of my heart was actually stopping me asserting boundaries. If I was only able to kind of make this knee-jerk closing response, and there's no judgment from me because I did it all the time, and we all do because we've all been hurt. It was a kind of a, sort of protect myself thing, and closing myself off from someone didn't actually result in having a proper boundary in place where I needed to. Ironically, it was only when I began to see there aren't any others to defend myself from, that I am everywhere, and that there isn't, or there is only the one being, whichever you prefer, that my heart began to open and see everyone as an aspect of my own self, of the one being, the supreme self. That this core unworthiness that was within me began to heal and disappear. And it was only then that I could actually begin to assert boundaries. And as you said here, some relationships that I had moved away without they disintegrated without my consent or agreement. They just disappeared from my life. Some people I also had to move away from intentionally because I could love them as the self, but they didn't have my best interest at heart, and I wasn't going to, or able to at that point, allow them to continue to treat me that way. So only with an open heart could I actually set boundaries, and this was so different to what I had thought, that with closed heart there are boundaries in place that keep me safe. It wasn't that. It was just keeping the worst, keeping the depths of the pain I was feeling, emotional pain, away from me. It was a way to numb myself. But it also numbed me from the deep, rich connection and intimacy with what is, with other beings, with peace, with bliss, everything, love in its deeper aspect. And that realization was vital for me, pivotal. It changed everything. And nobody was more surprised than me when I heard myself saying to some beings, this is really not how I want to be treated. And I don't think you want to keep doing this either. It was like, who on earth is that? It was obvious that my closed heart, egoic self could not have said those words, that it was coming from a deeper place of mutual respect for myself and this other being, or myself appearing as this other being, that I didn't want them to keep doing the same cycle with me, where some level, even if they're not aware of it, they would feel guilty for what they're doing and saying. And on some level, I was diminishing myself by letting that continue. And the self-respect and self-worth had grown to a point, having seen what I am, where I couldn't do that anymore. So it's total 180. We all have this lack of personal boundaries and a fear that if we open our heart, that we're just kind of going, come on in, everyone can take advantage of me, trample all over me. But it was so the opposite for me. Finally, I had the courage to do what I needed to do, to say what I wanted to say but couldn't to some beings, and to love myself enough to know what's best for me. And 100 times out of 100, what's best for me is also what's best for the other being in the relationship at that point. They may not know that or like that, but it was still what was best for them nonetheless. And some people you just have to love from a distance, physically, I mean, because they are not yet able to see that they are not separate to you, and therefore they behave from energy fields of separation. So there comes a point automatically where you can't, it's a habit then to do what's right for you, with a deep and profound knowing that that's not selfish, that is what is trying to unfold anyway. The actions and all that born out of love for your own self and the other being, respect for the other being, always result in situations that benefit you both, even if it's that you're supposed to go a different path from each other. It also brought a whole new host of loving relationships, people that respected me already for who I was, people that liked me, people that weren't trying to get anything from me. And in turn, I wasn't doing that to them anymore. You know, if you like me, I'll like you, and all these subtle energetic bargaining things we've got going on. If you approve of me, I'll make you feel better, and all of that. So we might think we're closing in order to clear karma and all of that stuff, but we're really just kind of holding ourselves in a status quo, in a kind of suspended animation while our heart is closed. We're not clearing any karma. We're not healing. We're not actually even able to set up boundaries like that at all. When your heart's open and you feel some kind of emotional pain, it then becomes a trigger, a response. It moves you forward to set, am I really upset at this being? Or am I upset that I've diminished my own self? I've put someone else's needs before my own yet again. And when I looked at that, that's what I was hurting about, that I continued to ignore myself, as we all do. And yet, you know, if we find that everything is divine, everything is the self, must also include this body and mind too. It's always the last place we apply this to set boundaries for ourselves, healthy boundaries. You don't even have to know how to do that, right? Just the intention to do what's right for you and everyone else involved. The words will just come out, the actions will just happen. So I hope that helps you to get a little clearer. It's a very confusing for me, subject for me as well. So wonderful. So Nadia S says, hi Helen, sometimes I hear about being the infinite self. I tune to that and think how wonderful it is. However, I cannot imagine living my life and constantly knowing this. Will life take care if I increase moments of being self-aware, and how? Absolutely, yes. If the more we come to see the awareness that we really are, we're self-aware, we're aware of what our self is, then that is going to become more and more our identity, who we know ourselves to be, is going to be switching over subtly in the background, very subtly at first. And less will I be reacting as a separate being, more and more as the universal being. And that may show in some very normal, ordinary ways, such as we were just saying, being able to set some boundaries for myself and not falling automatically into the old habits and patterns that we used to do as a separate being. So whatever we know ourselves to be, whatever we're seeing, whatever we're focused on, we get more of. So knowing ourselves to be the pure awareness, the self, capital S, that begins to pervade down into our thoughts, into our emotions, and then into our actions, and then into our relationships. And for me, just to live an open question, how can I allow this that I already am to express itself more? Or how can I allow the flow of love more? Or what can I do to kind of embody this more? Those questions, or what can I see to embody this more? Those questions really helped me to kind of open up to this. But absolutely, yes, life will sort that out for you. It's already doing it. It's just that we're relaxing more into that process, aren't we, here in Satsang, in non-duality and awakening. We're relaxing more into the process. It's already occurring, which is, I thought I was this, and I've been living as this separate being. Now I'm coming to see that I'm not that, I'm something very different. And that's got to change you on every kind of subtle level, even right down to your atomic cells, your atoms in your cells of your body. And it will eventually move through all of your relationships and begin to change them, upgrade them. As we were just saying, some of those that aren't so healthy will either change to become healthier, or they will disappear out of your life in a way that's mutually right for both of you. And your life will kind of get an upgrade in that. So just doing what you're doing right now. And no one can really imagine what it's like to be the self beforehand. And, for me, the change was so subtle and gradual that I didn't really notice I was different, living differently. And in fact, some people had to tell me, you're really very different these days. And I was like, am I? And people saying that kind of thing and sort of looking, oh yeah, something has changed. And then, as I was saying before, some emotions coming up that I couldn't resist, couldn't push away. And eventually, no emotion at all, no negative emotion at all in that way, no triggers, no responses, all of that. So I didn't even know that was possible. So I hope that gives you a little help to move forward there. And last but not least is SK, who says, Dear Helen, my question is about reality. So what exists in my reality may not exist in yours because of our conscious awareness through the five senses. Does my five senses create the beliefs that result in my reality? For example, if I believe there is more than one power, even if there actually isn't, it will appear through my five senses as if there is in my reality. Can something exist in my reality if I'm not consciously aware of it? What if we didn't have any of the five senses? Every human has at least one or two of the five senses, at least in my reality. Maybe that's different in your reality or someone else's. Thank you so much. Love and light and blessings. So let's say that you and I were sat here together in this room, and you were sat looking at the same view that I'm seeing here in this room now. Your eyes would see the same sensory feedback as my eyes are seeing. And if you sat in this chair, it would probably feel the same as it feels to me. If we both hear a sound, it would probably sound the same to both of our ears. So the difference then is the thought conceptualization that's going on after the sensory input has gone in. For most human beings, we have a visual, auditory stimuli through our senses. And the next thing that happens is our mind says a label, stamps a label. So it says the sound it hears is a bird singing or a dog barking, and it stamps labels, table, sofa, on everything it sees. And the difference is that more attention goes to the labels, the names, and the concepts in most people, most beings. And as a default setting, as a habit, attention goes to that. So the senses are perceiving, but very little attention is actually paid to what the senses are taking in. More attention goes to what the mind is saying about the senses and what they're taking. So the senses in themselves are quite innocent. They don't really cause a problem. It is the interpretation of what's coming in between the optic nerve and the brain. There's some kind of interpretation going on, or in the brain at least, thought process. So in an awakened being, at first, that conceptualization, that tendency for mind to comment on what's seen, at least at first, will still be present, but it's not given preferential treatment. More validity is given, switch over to what's actually being seen. So what we're actually taking in through our senses is only vibration. The senses are vibration, information collectors, and our brain gives it a label and rubber stamps that label, and we believe that label. So that ability to believe the label over the actual experience is gone in an awakened being. And then eventually the labels themselves stop being suggested. They're still there. You can kind of search through mind and use the label that you need to when you need to, but they're not automatically shoved at you when you're, so you're looking at this beautiful sunset, and mind isn't going to automatically go, it's not as nice as the sunset last year when we were on holiday in this place and we did this thing. And it begins to comment on and diminish the beauty of what you're actually experiencing in that moment. So an awakened being, that can't really happen. It's there as an option. The mind kind of silently waits until you go to it for information, rather than it thrusts this information at you, whether you like it or not, or want it or not. So what we think exists in your reality, what you think exists, may be a whole world of individual separate beings and separate objects. Like I might actually believe as a separate being that a TV and a table and a sofa are different things. That seems true, because I'm judging what I think exists based on how it appears to be, the appearance in the manifestation. And a sofa and a TV and a table look different. So my mind concludes they are different. So the major difference between our realities, for want of a better word, would probably be, I mean, I don't know where you're at in your awakening, so I'm just talking from the perspective of a separate being. When someone thinks they're separate, they will perceive and experience, as you suggested, because I think it's there, I will experience it, a whole world of separate beings and separate things, and infinite number of forms with all different labels and names that we could add to it. Some of those subtly inside, some of them externally outside. And all those collectively together are known as the universe. But in the other way of perceiving, there is just this which has no name, that can appear as a sofa, a table, a TV, a human body, a thought, an emotion, a mountain, a universe, a black hole, a bird, a blade of grass. All of that can also appear as nothing at all, emptiness. But there isn't any elation at the word emptiness and then disappointment at the word thought, because they seem to be the same thing. When we take the labels away from anything, only the essence remains. So if you didn't have any of the five senses, you could still come to the same conclusion as I'm talking about here. You could see, even if you couldn't physically see the sofa that I'm looking at, I could describe it to you. You could picture a sofa in your mind and stamp the label sofa on it. Picturing that in your mind right now, any sofa, what happens when you take the label away? What really is it? Of course, the word sofa is fine. It's the label. And if I needed to go buy a sofa, it would be a useful label. Like, where do I go to buy a sofa? it wouldn't really work to go and say, where can I buy emptiness that I can sit on, you know? So labels are fine. The only challenge is when we give them preferential treatment, therefore we experience those labels more than we experience the essence of the thing. And therefore, we lose the intimacy with what's actually here because we're more focused on what's going on here than what's actually happening around us. And we're kind of hypnotized by our thoughts because we've been told that we can't really perceive reality without them, or that we need to name something in order to experience it and understand it. And what if that's not true? What if the most direct way to perceive reality is just to step away from labels? And the biggest labels of all, I and you. So I hope that kind of answers your question, but if not, please, get back to me, and we'll go from there. So remembering that our senses are seeing the same things. Well, even that, I suppose I could say that's not strictly true. There is, for me, there was a little upgrade to the senses. So sights, sounds, colors, taste, smells all became, I'm going to say became more abundant, clearer. Colors were more vivid and all of that. But really, what it actually is the first time experiencing this without the mind getting in the way and diminishing that experience. Tastes of food and things like that were and are exquisite. Like it's the best thing I've ever had. And to see colors, vivid, bright green grass. So I'm seeing the same thing you'd be seeing, but maybe just slightly more intensity in that experience. Without the filter, the energy it takes to kind of stamp everything with a label and ignore reality and go to the label diminishes your kind of sensory input by the time it comes in. So there is a little tiny difference in what we're seeing. It's like someone just turns the color up and the volume up and the flavor up on your world, and gives it a much more immersive feel. I don't know the right word there, but hopefully you can get the idea of that. Mainly we imagine a whole 7 billion separate beings, and really there's only 7 billion human bodies and one being. It's like if you imagine that you only had one name, one noun that you could use to name anything. So everything had that same noun. Your experience would be different then, wouldn't it? Very different. Things that you like, things that you don't like, things you're scared of, things you want to have, all this same one noun. How would that be? So that brings us to the end of this Ask Me Anything section. And just to recap, if you do have anything you want to ask or share, anything that you're struggling with, stick it as a comment underneath this video. And at the end of June, I'll do what I've just done here. And it's always fun and enjoyable to me to see what's on your mind and see what you're struggling with, what you are breaking through as well. I'm always more than happy to hear people breaking through into deeper peace and clarity. So thank you very much. And I will see you after retreat, after a break, a short break after that too. Thank you. Namaste.